We should be live. Live now.
Great, thank you. So welcome everyone. Of course, this is a special council meeting that is devoted to the announcement around a forthcoming provincial correctional facility for our community. Owing to some requests from community members and organizations, as well as our own want to ensure we provided a public forum and a more formal opportunity for folks to express perspectives and concerns. We're very pleased to welcome you this evening. So this, of course, is council meeting number 17 that we're holding, of course, virtually, as pandemic times continue on March 23rd at 6:30 p.m. So I think everyone who has pre-registered for the meeting has been let into the room. Any latecomers, of course, will be admitted by our clerk's staff. And in addition, we are streaming live on YouTube. And I know our municipality is in fact sharing the link for the live stream to YouTube. So the meeting is being recorded and the information is being shared through the municipality's Facebook page. So I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll look for an approval of the agenda and a disclosure of interests. I will make some opening comments prior to inviting our delegations to speak this evening. But first order of business is that our special council agenda be approved as presented. And of course, council colleagues, we have a list of 9 organizations this evening, or individuals who have signed up to speak. So of course, they are the bulk of our agenda this evening. So can I look for a motion from Councillor Stracher-Yan and Councillor O'Sullivan, please, that our special council agenda be approved as presented? I can't see you, yes, colleagues. Yes. I trust that you're with us.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Good stuff. So thank you. I'll call the question, colleagues. All in favor, just raise your hands or just say aye. Good. Thank you. So that passes. Of course, we are going through the formalities of a council meeting because this is a formally convened council meeting with a singular objective, but there it is. Second, of course, is to close disclosures of interest. And this is specific only to council members in regards to any perceived or real financial benefit or loss coming from tonight's meeting. Colleagues, I hear no disclosures of interest, so that's great. So before we go into the presentations and delegations as chair, I will be just making some opening remarks to set the stage, certainly for both process and substance. So thank you. And we're so happy. I think we have about 70 folks on the Zoom call tonight. So thank you all for joining us. When I ran for mayor, I had a clear vision for our community. 2 things were not part of that vision: a global pandemic, this may come as no surprise, and a new correctional facility. Both have taken certainly council by surprise, but we are certainly focused on guiding our community through these developments. First and foremost, on behalf of council, I want you to know that we certainly appreciate many of the concerns that you have expressed and the frustration about the announcement around the new facility. I was taken aback, as was council and all of you, when the announcement of the new correctional facility was made last August by Premier Ford and the Ontario Solicitor General, Minister Sylvia Jones. I want you to know that since the announcement, your council and municipal staff have been working hard with the ministry to learn more about the plans, to ensure our community has a voice, and that the Ontario government is accountable to our concerns. Throughout, Premier Ford, the Solicitor General, and Minister Steve Clark have been very available and accessible to us, but they have also made it clear that the new facility is not going anywhere else. Therefore, we have been adamant with the Ministry of the Solicitor General that we expect direct answers to our questions regarding the potential impact of the facility on our community. Since the announcement, we have demanded that the concerns raised by our residents are responded to by SolGen in a number of different ways. Many in this community, including council, have had a vision for the farmside lands owned by the province. Unfortunately, as I think most of you know by now, they were not part of the municipality's acquisition of the 626 acres of Kemptville College lands. Nonetheless, we are working diligently towards shaping what happens on the large parcel of land that likely will not be used adjacent to the forthcoming correctional facility. We have already made headway with the ministry towards identifying this possibility in terms of ensuring sufficient community benefits and investments by the province. We are also and have been speaking with the ministry about the precise location of the correctional facility on the Farmside lands so that they are as far back from County Road 44 as possible. Finally, we have discussed the nature of the facility with the ministry, and they have confirmed their commitment from the get-go of offering more dignified and safe accommodations, as well as supportive programming for those who are incarcerated in Eastern Ontario because of a provincial sentence. Within weeks of the announcement, Council urged Ontario's Ministry of the Solicitor General and Minister Clark to fast-track its public consultation efforts last fall. The normal process for the province would have been to hold the first public consultation this spring. And I want to recognize Minister Steve Clark's office is on this call, and as our representatives, senior representatives from the Ministry of the Solicitor General. And they were more than willing to accommodate Council's request and the community's request to get more information more quickly to Council and the community. So the first public meeting to explain the project and answer questions from the local community was held on October 30th. Council insisted that several community groups, including opposition voices, as well as representatives from the Campbell District Hospital, local school boards, and the Salvation Army, and the business community were front and center at this meeting. In addition, last fall, Council insisted with the ministry that they hold its first public meeting on November 26th. And of course, many of you will recall that over 300 people joined that Zoom forum, and it went on for nearly 4 hours. We also ensured that 3 additional sessions took place in December with the local school boards, service organizations, and the criminal justice system, as well as representatives from the Campbell District Hospital. We are also very pleased to announce that we have an upcoming session taking place with both the English and French school boards in both languages later this spring in May. The Deputy Mayor and I also began meeting virtually in October with several mayors throughout Ontario who have correctional facilities in their backyards. These meetings continued into February of this year and have focused on how our community should prepare. What questions do we need to ask? What commitments do we need to secure to ensure a safe and well-functioning facility should it come? Further, on January 25th, 26th, myself and Council met with Solicitor General Sylvia Jones and Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, Parliamentary Assistant Randy Pettipies. And in those meetings, we expressed the many concerns our community has, and we also presented a strong case for using any surplus farmside lands to honor and leverage our rich agricultural history. Council's response to date to the new facility has been carefully weighed. The reality, like it or not, is that the Ontario government holds the cards with the land and with, obviously, provincial correctional services. We recognize the significant concern about a 235-bed correctional facility in North Grenville. Council's job is to ensure that the decisions made with respect to the facility respond to our community's various concerns, and that the facility will not disrupt plans for tourism, economic development, the Kemptville campus, or undermine the quality of life of residents that we have come to enjoy and should absolutely expect moving forward. We are at the table and we expect the Ontario government to deliver. To this point, the province has signaled their willingness to be a responsive community partner and neighbor. It is critical that the channels of communication remain open between your council and the province. To that end, we are here tonight to give individuals and groups the space to express their concerns and to provide your input while being on the record in a formally convened council meeting. In preparation for tonight's meeting, we invited individual groups wishing to present to pre-register so that we can plan accordingly. We have asked all presenters to limit their comments to 15 minutes or less. The clerk will be giving a signal at the 10-minute mark, and out of respect for the 8 remaining presentations, or depending where you are on the list, we are urging you to stick with your 15-minute allocation. We have scheduled breaks after each hour of presentations in order to give everyone some breathing room. Make sure that you take the time to stretch your legs, get a glass of water, but we will obviously keep going until all the presentations are made. As I've noted, we do have representation from Minister Steve Clark's office, MPP Steve Clark's office, as well as senior representatives from the ministry. And we are grateful that they're here so that they can hear the substance and the perspectives from the community. All submissions, however, that have been received by email will also be sent directly to the ministry, and we're assured that they will be given due attention. We want you to know that we appreciate you being here very much. Given the length of the meeting and the number of presentations, we don't expect to invite a lot of additional comments except for a short period at the end, which we expect will be approximately 30 minutes. As you know, Council has set up a dedicated email address for written communications. That is input, INPUT, at northgrenville.on.ca. And I want you to know that Council has received a number of written communications from people who weren't able to attend or didn't feel comfortable doing so this evening. They will present both positive and more negative concerns and perspectives. And I can't see myself in the Zoom window anymore, but they're all here. So we've received somewhere between 10 and 15 written communications, and those will also be shared. So without further ado, I think we'll go straight to the first presentation. And I want to extend my thanks to the clerk's office for timing presentations. So you'll get a cue, I believe, from Ms. Babcock-Cormier at the 10-minute mark. And she'll let you know when we're at the 15-minute mark. And then the Deputy Mayor and I will do our best to facilitate a transition to the next presentation. We appreciate your interest very, very much. And thank you for joining this evening. And I believe first on my list is Amanda Giles. And she's here to talk about community housing versus correctional institutions. So I'm going to leave it to the clerk's office to help us get the right technology in place. I don't know if Ms. Giles has a presentation.
Ms. Giles does have a presentation, Your Worship.
Okay.
And I'm just going to call upon, I'm not seeing Ms. Giles in the participants. Ms. Giles, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you
Welcome,
for
Ms.
this
Giles.
opportunity. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Peckford and council and community members. Just a disclaimer, I do have a 3-month-old with me, so I'm at his whim and mercy. Hopefully this goes smoothly.
Okay, take your time.
So I am grateful for the opportunity to present to you this evening. I have tenderly named my presentation Community Housing versus Correctional Institutions. So what is the plan for Kemptville and who gets to decide? Next slide, please. The following presentation is a collection of questions that I've asked myself and that I wish to bring forward to the community today. And hopefully this can open a dialogue between the community and our municipality on some areas where I am concerned. So how can we ensure that the needs of our community are being met? How do we stay focused on those needs as we communicate with influencers? And how will a correctional facility truly impact the natural, physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial needs of our community? Next slide, please. I want you to consider this geographical photo of Ontario, and the following few slides are different photos, and I'd invite everyone to just kind of look and reflect and see if you can identify these locations. So if we can pause here. I'm sure, hopefully everyone recognizes this particular photograph. This is North Grenville, focused on Kemptville. And as you saw in the previous slide, we are not that far from Ottawa. And so I just want to keep that in mind as we go forward. Next slide, please. So this might seem like a mundane question, but what do human beings need to survive? We've all perhaps been faced with this over the last year and such. Shelter, homes, secure and safe spaces, food, resources, water, blood, spirit, community. These things are vital for our survival. And you'll note that I put shelter at the top because that is the foundation of our community. Next slide, please. Ontario is at risk of losing our community housing at a time when we need more. This is directly from Ontario's Community Housing Renewal Strategy, their introduction. So we are at risk of losing our community housing at a time when we need more. Why are we not investing in community housing? And what does community housing mean? Is it the province that decides what our community needs, or does the municipality inform the province what the people need? Next slide, please. Providing people with appropriate housing and supports also helps to reduce and prevent homelessness, unnecessary hospital admissions, and involvement with the criminal justice system. This is from Ontario Supportive Housing Policy Framework. And so I ask, who decides what appropriate housing means? They might be redundant questions, but just to sit with. Next slide, please. So I found this interesting. Across all three governments, approximately $5 billion was spent on housing and homelessness services in Ontario, 2017 to 2018. So you'll note community housing, 54% was municipally funded. A small 11% was provincial, and the federal government picked up the remaining 35%. Meanwhile, provincial governments supported 99% of supportive housing. And so I ask, what is the difference between community housing and supportive housing? Next slide. Ontario is the only jurisdiction in Canada where municipal levels of government, through service system managers, hold responsibility for housing. In other provinces, housing programs are fully funded and delivered by provincial or territorial governments and supported by federal funding contributions. The province is funding service system managers who are responsible for managing 260,000 plus affordable housing units, representing a combined $40 billion asset. This sounds like a business. Next slide, please. Why am I asking questions about housing when we are here to discuss a correctional facility? Well, had the province asked what resources our community is desperately in need of, my first response would have been affordable, rural, yes, sustainable homes for people who are already trying to live here. Yes. Members of the community are struggling to meet their basic needs. Excuse me for a second. Basic needs. Members of the community are struggling to meet their basic needs because of housing market inflation and because of the incredibly unsustainable systems in place. I have experienced firsthand how inaccessible housing has become for the average human being who is really just trying to survive this pandemic. Without a safe and secure home, I'm forced to interact with the greater community to meet my most basic needs. And this puts us all at risk. How can we be expected to self-isolate if we don't have a home? And how is the municipality addressing this huge concern? Meanwhile, the province's priority build for our community is a prison. I know, it's distressing. A top-down decision that tried to enforce that it was a done deal. How very undiplomatic. You're all right. Next slide, please. So I'll jump into a few things I've pulled from public information off of Stats Canada and various government websites. So the total operating, I know, I know, you're tired. This is the witching hour. Total operating expenditures for adult corrections. You'll note the provinces and territories total was $2,692,706,000. And Ontario accounted for nearly a third or over a third of that total as far as their corrections spending. Next slide, please. I know. So I forgot to make the note of where this came from. It's a footnote 6 of the, anyway, it's online. Federal expenditures include both Correctional Service of Canada and the Parole Board of Canada, but exclude CORCAN, the special operating agency that employs federal inmates. I thought this was interesting. So what is CORCAN? Next slide, please. I know. So CORCAN is a key rehabilitation program of the Correctional Service of Canada. And you'll note its #1 training focuses on manufacturing. #2 is textiles. #3, construction. #4, services. A key rehabilitation program. The #1 focus is manufacturing. I will reserve my speculations. Next slide. So another thing I noted on the website was that CORCAN has a revolving fund with the federal government, something that I'm sure many small businesses would appreciate in this time. A revolving fund is a fund or account that remains available to finance an organization's continuing operations without any fiscal year limitation. So again, this is a business, correct? This appears to be a business. And the federal government appears to be directly linked. This is concerning, a red flag for me. Next slide, please. So I won't read this whole thing, I'll just read what I've bolded. CORCAN runs the operation and supplies all staff, while the client processes per release timesheets and bills CORCAN for the pay. So what exactly that exchange is, I'm not sure. But as you can see, client-based agreements, supplier-based agreements, CORCAN is a business and they are selling a product.
That's 10 minutes.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So these are just photos of the CORCAN website, very clearly linked to the Government of Canada. And I think, was it the previous slide we skipped over? Go to the next slide. Yes, there's several audits that have been done. The last time the website was updated was 2013, so I couldn't find any more recent information. And at the time in 2013, all of these audits were either underway or planned, so we don't know what the outcome was of any of these, or if there was more. I know. Just go to sleep. Next slide, please.
Amanda?
Yep.
You're more than welcome to finish your presentation. I love the baby noises, but if you want to take a few minutes, you can come back and finish up whatever is easiest for you. I just wanted to give you the option.
If I could have a few minutes, that'd be great, and I could get him settled.
So why don't we'll let you put the baby down, and we'll give you your 5 minutes after whatever presentation is in play, and you can wrap up. Does that work? Okay. Okay, good. So Heather, if you will just remind us to go back to Amanda once she's prepared to finish, we'll of course allocate her 5 minutes at another time. And I'm sorry I didn't do that sooner. I didn't want her to think that baby noises were in any way offending council. So, but it looks like it was probably a good time for her to take a break. Excellent. So we appreciate that, and we look forward to hearing the remainder of Amanda's presentation at her convenience this evening, however long it takes. So next we'll go to Briony Baxter. Briony Baxter, who of course is well known to many of us. She's a former human rights advocate and an ED of the Elizabeth Fry Society. And welcome, Briony.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Mayor Peckford. So I'm going to start with my bona fides. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm just going to speak. And for the sake of the record, I'm here as a small business owner in Kemptville and a local resident. I am representing myself and in no other capacity. For 10 years, I was the executive director of the Elizabeth Fry Society of Ottawa, which many of you will know is a human rights advocacy organization advocating for women in prisons and jails, and also supplying rehabilitation services for women leaving correctional facilities. I was also on the OCDC task force appointed by Minister Naqvi to propose recommendations to fix OCDC. In that capacity, the capacity of eFry, I have toured jails throughout Ontario and indeed elsewhere in Canada, both provincial jails and federal prisons, monitoring conditions of confinement and dealing with thousands of human rights issues of prisoners. I have testified at hearings and inquests, and I'm still doing so, even though I've not been with EFRI for 3 years. I've been present for some of the most inhumane human rights abuses in jail, such as the Christina Yan case, where a woman with severe mental illness was kept in segregation for almost a year, and the Julie Bellotta case, where a woman in labor with a breech birth was punished for asking for help and screaming in pain during her labor by being sent to segregation, where she literally gave birth to a baby boy who later died on the floor of her cell. So all this to say, I know whereof I speak in these matters. I'm here today to speak about the effects of building a prison on our community in terms of infrastructure needs and taxpayer consequences, and to touch on how those needs will impact prisoner reintegration and what this means for North Grenfell. And I'd like to start by referring you to a study by Greg McGilligot in Studies in Social Justice from February 2017. McGilligot examines the following claims. Number one, that there are construction jobs and other new jobs for a community when a prison is built, and that there will be consequent economic growth for the community. He compares new prison jail development in both the US and Canada, seeking to confirm whether these statements are indeed true, and he concludes with the following. Prisons do buy some things locally, but the vast majority of goods and services needed to provide for a jail are bulk purchased, in this case provincially, and handled centrally. Local communities pay the infrastructure needs of the prison, even of the expense of other local priorities, and it's left to local governments to absorb these costs. That jails in a community do suppress local property values, and that jobs for jails are also centrally allocated. So in a system governed by collective agreement, these unionized jobs are centrally allocated, which represents about 67% of the prison's annual budget, which is spent on human resources. So there's relatively few opportunities for local jobs. So with regard to infrastructure needs of the new jail for Kemptville, what are these? Well, first of all, our roads do not have the capacity to support the needs of a new prison. Think of the personnel coming in from Ottawa and elsewhere. Never mind visitors, prisoners' visitors, other professionals, charities, advocates, etc. We do not have the transportation links that jails needs. Successful prisoner reintegration depends heavily on good social and family supports, and prisoners depend heavily on in-person visits from family and friends and support networks. Jails have a legislated mandate to provide reintegration supports, including travel to their home communities for prisoners upon release. And how this will occur when Kemptville doesn't even have a public transportation infrastructure to allow family visits to occur or to get people safely home on release. Prisoners have repeatedly told me they want in-person visits, not video conferences. And anybody who's tried to celebrate a family birthday on a Zoom call during a pandemic understands this. I would further add that capacity at the Kemptville District Hospital is likely to be significantly compromised, which may see longer wait times potentially for Kemptville residents. As my opening remarks attest to, healthcare in jails is woefully adequate. In fact, the Ontario Ombudsman reports 2,400 healthcare complaints from Ontario jails in just 1 year. Ombudsman Paul Dubé cites poor living conditions, overcrowding, lack of inmate access to healthcare, and describes conditions in jails as appalling. That's the Ombudsman. The spillover from what is not accessible within the jail will place additional needs on the Kemptville Hospital, but we've had no promises that extra dollars will be allocated to prepare for this increased need. We do not have the social service supports needed, such as local EFRI and John Howard agencies, and there has been no suggestion of extra funds to these agencies to expand local services outside of their current spaces in Ottawa and Kingston. And finally, there are reintegration issues that will spill over to the Kemptville community. There is an historically documented lack of discharge planning, despite legislation to the contrary, for those leaving Ontario jails. I can personally attest to multiple instances where people have been literally escorted off the property upon release and left to fend for themselves with no ID, no seasonally appropriate clothing, no money, no transportation home. Lack of employment, housing, and support for complex needs leads to a revolving door of arrests and incarceration for prisoners. For example, when the Windsor Jail, known as the Southwestern Detention Center, opened in July 2014, I've been to this jail. The homeless or precariously housed population in Windsor was 2,700. The City of Windsor's own report on current and future needs says that since then they've seen an 84% increase in needs, and that the homeless population is well over 5,000 now. Now, we can't necessarily contribute all of this to the jail, but I certainly believe there's a correlation. People who have lost family supports and social supports in their home community and have no way home, when they are released from jail, they stay in the communities to which they are released. We already have an affordable homelessness and housing problem in North Grenville, as the previous speaker has attested, and this will make it worse. So where are the funds to support a new housing strategy in the region? So to conclude, if the Ontario government had announced they were planning on building a treatment centre for mental health and addictions in our community, I would have absolutely no objection. My objections are not based on NIMBYism, but rather on the huge tax burden this will place on our community for a new jail that is simply not needed. Over 2/3 of all those incarcerated in Ontario jails are there on remand. They have not yet been convicted of any crime at all, and the vast majority are there not for crimes of violence. They pose no threat to community safety. They are denied bail on the basis of having no fixed address or on the lack of social supports to deal with their addiction or mental health that has led to their criminality. If we were to spend the amount of money we are spending on this jail, fixing the broken bail system and providing treatment supports, we would not need a new jail. We would not need more jail beds. And the residents of North Grenville would not be called upon to dig into our own wallets to pay for an infrastructure support for a jail we didn't ask for in the first place. I do not envy you this job as municipal councils and as mayor. You did not ask for this to be thrust upon you, but you will undoubtedly take the heat for it when it all goes pear-shaped, as it inevitably will, given the lack of resources we have to meet the needs of this jail in our small community. Your job, as I see it, is to advocate as hard as possible for the citizens of North Grenville to see we are not put in this unenviable position of hosting a jail we do not need, we do not want, we cannot afford, and we do not support. I hope the coming provincial election between now and the building of this jail will put us in a better position to abandon this plan altogether and focus on a more positive outcome for the land in question. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation. Thank you. Okay, next is Dr. Erin Doyle, and I'm assuming, oh, we have Amanda back. So I'm just going to see if Amanda is willing to finish up, or if she would. Amanda, can you hear us? Do you want to wait a bit longer, or are you ready to go now? It's again at your convenience. We can accommodate you whenever. Later?
I think now would be good, and then I'm off the hook.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we're just going to call up your presentation. There you are. So do your thing, and don't sweat the baby noise. We were just giving you a little a little break. Okay.
Hopefully he's a little positive distraction.
He's looking good.
Thank you.
So you've got about 5 minutes to wrap up. Thanks, Amanda.
Okay, perfect. So we're looking at CORCAN. It's obviously very embedded in the government of Canada. It's on their website. So I was just asking questions about this, and I'm inviting the community to also ask questions. Next slide, please. Oh, an example, their specialty products, which I will also not comment on. Next slide, please. So what does rehabilitation mean? The act of restoring someone to health or normal life through training and therapy and after imprisonment, addiction, or illness. What does rehabilitation mean? The action of restoring something that has been damaged to its former condition. As far as I can see, CORCAN has no intention of restoring someone to health or normal life. We've been learning how to do that by ourselves as we work to evolve and survive this pandemic. CORCAN, and by extension our governments, are apparently only concerned with their financial needs. What about mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, and the natural health of our communities? CORCAN is a business that capitalizes on vulnerable people who are not given any choice but to comply and work in order to remove themselves from the system. This, I hate to say it, sounds awfully similar to a not so distant reality where slavery was publicly legal. Next slide. Canada conducted a groundbreaking study observing a housing first model in 2014. In the last 6 months of the study, 84% of the housing first participants remained housed, while just 54% of the TAU participants receiving what is the current support system remained housed. Researchers also found that permanent housing cost less than traditional services, partly because of a reduction in medical and criminal justice related expenses. So why, pray tell, is the province continuing to invest hundreds of millions of dollars into a criminal justice system when we have proof that it is not an effective or moral means of rehabilitating people who have been systemically marginalized and criminalized? That's a mouthful, sorry. Next slide. So my natural community is where I will be investing my energy, because my ability to sustain myself depends on that community. I personally will do everything within my power to halt this construction and to implore the municipality, he's going to be a public speaker, I swear, and implore the municipality to take a step back from their ongoing implementation of a horrifically unjust, unsustainable system. We have a tremendous opportunity that requires an incredible amount of responsibility to ensure today's actions are in the best interest of the next generations, not only humans, but all living creatures which live here, or who are trying to so resiliently live here. Using the knowledge and experience of the preceding generations, we can see the trauma, we can stop inflicting trauma, and we're capable of healing and growing forwards together. Has Council considered the toxic and inhumane repercussions this type of industrialized penal institution is known to have on people? Until Indigenous land protectors and water protectors are no longer criminalized, until human beings whose needs have been systemically unmet are no longer criminalized, and until a fair and just democratic process is held to determine the fate of my community, I will not sit down. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amanda, for your presentation and for coming back to complete it. We appreciate it. All right. So then we'll go back to the order of the list, and we have Dr. Erin Doyle, who's an associate professor at Carleton University, Department of Sociology and Anthropology.
Okay.
Dr. Erin Doyle, are you here with us this evening?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks, Mayor Peckford. Thank you for listening, everybody. Thanks to Amanda. I thought you made a very effective presentation there and making a very important point. Yeah, I'm a professor of sociology and criminology at Carleton University, and I'm here because I've studied our prisons for many years. I'm not a Kemptville resident, not a North Grenville resident. This is a very important issue for the town, but it's also bigger than just a Kemptville issue. As an Ontario taxpayer and voter, I'm very concerned that crucial policy decisions are being made about this prison behind closed doors and without meaningful public input. So it's good that this meeting is happening.
I'll go get it.
The problem,
We just got some cross audio. Okay, we'll see how it goes, Dr. Doyle. Keep going ahead.
okay. The province says the new prison is a quote essential service, unquote. So some say that if you're against the new jail, then you're a selfish NIMBY, a not in my backyarder. But I want to argue that we don't need a new prison, period. It doesn't have to go in anybody's backyard. The province is keeping quiet on the cost, but based on the cost of similar facilities, the new Kemptville prison will cost at least $250 million to build and more than $20 million a year to operate. Assistant Deputy Minister Karen Ellis said the prison is needed because of what she called capacity pressures in Eastern Ontario. Looking at the numbers, I'm not seeing those capacity pressures. During the early stages of the pandemic, the province released many prisoners to limit COVID outbreaks in jails, and Ontario's prison population dropped by about 30%. And this was something the province had been saying for many years they were going to do. They were going to work to reduce the prison population by releasing folks on bail and folks that they thought would be safe doing time in the community. They promised to do this in the 2000s, but they failed to do it. They were able to do it in pandemic times, and something very revealing happened, which is that there was no rash of law breaking. StatsCan crime rates actually dipped in the first 6 months of the pandemic, despite all the prisoners being released. And in fact, official crime rates in general have declined in Canada since 2000. So with the 2018 crime rate around 30% lower than peak levels in 2003. Next point, as Bryony Baxter was saying, most Ontario prisoners are not even serving sentences. Most prisoners are pre-trial on remand, locked up awaiting their day in court, often for minor charges. And the province has said many of these people on remand could safely be in the community. The province has admitted that Ontario's bail system is not working properly. So instead, we taxpayers are having to pay at least $250 million for a whole new prison in Kentville, because the Ottawa jail is going to be used only for all these people on remand. Next point, a very large number of prisoners in Ottawa and elsewhere are people with mental health or drug issues, often homeless, which is why Amanda's presentation is so important, and living with various kinds of trauma. So these are people whom former Corrections Minister Yasser Naqvi admitted should not be jailed, but should be getting help somewhere else. The province's finances are in a mess because of the pandemic. The last thing we need is to spend $250 million on another new jail. When we build new jails, they fill, and it stops us from finding other solutions. Fix the bail system instead. House the homeless. Ontario's behind the times on this. Other governments are recognizing that prisons are costly, harmful, and counterproductive. So states like New Jersey and Oregon are closing prisons rather than building more. More and more policymakers are seeing that prison does not rehabilitate people and instead damages them. Prisons are full of poor, homeless, very often racialized or Indigenous people who are ground down and dehumanized by deprivation, poor healthcare and food, filth, boredom, degradation, and violence in these institutions. Prisons are the opposite of therapeutic. There's a ton of research evidence showing the counterproductive effects of incarceration. We are told by the ministry this new prison will somehow be different from all the others. So this time it will be all about rehabilitation. And we're told that a new building is what we need for rehabilitation, even though it will house a lot of the same staff that moved from the notorious Ottawa Carleton Detention Center. These problems are systemic. You can't fix these problems with a new building with the same people in the new building doing the same things as before. The province made the same kinds of promises about the Southwest Detention Center in Windsor when it opened in 2014. It didn't work. Here are some recent headlines. Overcrowding, lockdowns at Windsor Jail are a crisis, says lawyer. Guard describes the poisoned work environment at Southwest Detention Center. Inquest into death of inmate at Windsor Jail. Prisoner took her life while in custody at the Southwest Detention Center. It's a terrible thing, but it's a virtual certainty that numerous people will also die in your Kentville prison from violence, suicide, or overdoses there on the campus. That relations between management and frontline staff will continue to be strained, and that the Kemptville prison will become the target of a bunch of lawsuits and human rights cases and related headlines. So these headlines about Windsor could be headlines about your community. Another prisoner suicide at Kemptville prison. Another lawsuit about mistreatment at Kemptville prison. It's not a good look for the community. It's a major reputational risk. In a webinar organized by the Coalition Against the Proposed Prison, we heard from an economist, Dr. Janjala Chirajika, who's a professor at Monash University, and she quantified the economic impacts of 230 new prison builds in the United States. And the economist found, firstly, that real estate prices decreased 2 to 4% in the area surrounding the prison. She also found that, and I quote from her paper, quote, prisons fail to create spillovers to other sectors or generate substantial boost to local economies. These results run contrary to claims made by prison proponents, including government officials who promote prisons to communities, unquote. So I'm happy to share that study with council. We know that many of the jobs at the Kemptville prison will go to existing staff at the Ottawa Carleton Detention Center. Another problem is that if the prison does create new jobs in Kemptville, they will be unhealthy jobs. Working as prison staff is damaging to people. A review of all the studies internationally on correctional officers and PTSD was published in 2019 in the peer-reviewed journal Corrections Policy, Practice, and Research. The study was called Prevalence of PTSD, Depression, and Anxiety Disorders in Correctional Officers, a systematic review. And this sums up the body of research on this topic. It found, and I quote, evidence of high prevalence of PTSD, depression, and anxiety when compared to other occupational groups and the general population. These issues were also associated with physical problems such as heart disease, hypertension, and ulcers, interpersonal problems such as marital discord and family conflict, and emotional stress reactions and drug and alcohol abuse. So those are the jobs that will be coming to Kemptville. These are not dream jobs. They are desperation jobs. Is Kemptville that desperate? Is this the only alternative? There was some discussion that the prison might buy local food, which would be an economic benefit to the region. But in fact, provincial prisons and jails like the Ottawa Carleton Detention Center serve reheated frozen meals, and these meals are all produced at a center in Milton, not prepared locally.
10 minutes.
So there is no local economic benefit. Building this prison is a major public policy mistake. Permitting it in Kemptville is a major mistake for the town. In other places, residents have successfully fought against building new prisons. For example, in Monroe County in Indiana. The Ontario public have been successful in getting the Ford government to walk back a number of other unpopular initiatives. It would be highly unfortunate for Kemptville residents and for the Ontario public if council feels its only move is to lie down and accept having this harmful prison imposed upon the town. Thank you.
On mute. Thank you, Dr. Doyle. We appreciate your presentation and sticking to time. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll next go to Dr. Justin Piché. He's an associate professor at the University of Ottawa in the Department of Criminology. Dr. Piché, you're here somewhere? There you are.
Hi there. So I'll just get started.
Please, thanks.
Thank you. When the Greater Ottawa Correctional Complex was announced in late August, Solicitor Sylvia Jones stated, the Ontario government is making a substantial investment, but it isn't one that's likely to transform imprisonment as she claimed, nor is it likely to be a boon for the local economy. A few speakers have already gone over this, but I'll go over this quickly. The best independent academic research that's been amassed over several decades indicates that new prisons fail to live up to their stated objectives, and that human caging is indeed the most costly and ineffective way to prevent violence in our communities. The best independent academic research that's been amassed over several decades also indicates that in comparable counties that don't have prisons versus those that went ahead with building new sites of confinement, it's those without prisons that perform better economically. They've developed infrastructure and utilities to attract other forms of economic development rather than concentrating such investments around building sites of human caging. The research shows that newly established prison towns are vulnerable to the stigma of locking people up, being attached to them, and lose opportunities to diversify their economies in areas like tourism as a result. The stigma will only be amplified if Kemptville aligns itself with forces that are intent on continually mass incarcerating Indigenous and Black people instead of those demanding land back and an end to racism, all too evident in decisions made at every single stage of our punitive injustice system, from who gets investigated by police to who gets released from prison. Proponents of the Kemptville prison insist that local construction jobs are on the way, yet Canadian research that Brownie Baxter cited shows that these short-term construction jobs tend to go to companies based in larger urban centers that will be driving down the 416. Proponents say the project will provide secure, well-paying long-term government jobs for North Grenville residents, yet the ministry has already admitted that many of these jobs will go to existing Solicitor General staff based at the Ottawa Carleton Detention Centre who already live in the region. Proponents say that the project will provide opportunities for local businesses to obtain service contracts when big ticket items like food services and canteen are contracted out to large corporations that ship their products in from elsewhere, as Dr. Doyle mentioned. Now, if we use the 350-bed Southwest Detention Center in Windsor as a recent comparator, as government officials frequently do, a facility whose price tag was $336 million, or more than $1 million per bed, over the life of a 30-year public-private partnership, I've estimated that it will cost at least $250.7 million over the life of a 30-year mortgage to design, build, finance, and maintain the Eastern Ontario Correctional Complex. That's an average of $8.4 million a year, or $22,892 a day for 30 years. Relatedly, it now costs an average of $110,000 per year, or $302 per day, to imprison just one person in Ontario's jails and prisons. If the government of Ontario builds a new 235-bed prison in Kemptville and runs it at what Solicitor General officials have said would be its ideal capacity of 85%, that's 200 beds, it'll cost $22 million a year, or $60,400 a day, just to cover the costs of operating the facility. Bringing these infrastructure and operational costs together, it will cost, and I'm just scrolling here through my figures, just bear with me, at least $30.4 million a year, or $83,000 a day for 30 years to set this prison up and run it. And while I think it's great that the province wants to invest this kind of money, especially in North Grenville or anywhere else, if they actually want to invest in bettering your town and Eastern Ontario's future, I think local residents should direct how to spend these funds in ways that best serve your community, instead of having a prison project imposed on you that'll likely see much of the benefits from it flow elsewhere. With the funds earmarked to cover the operational costs alone, the province could address the housing crisis, one that sees, or could start addressing the housing crisis, one that sees almost a quarter of people in provincial jails cycling from jail to homelessness and then from homelessness to jail. We need homes, not cages, in this province. So if we add the infrastructure and operational costs together, $30.4 million a year, we could provide permanent and supportive housing for 760 people. With $30.4 million a year, we could provide rent supplements of $500 per month to over 5,000 households. With $30.4 million a year, we could make over 1,200 emergency housing spaces available. The criminological research has clearly showed for several decades that imprisonment is the most costly and effective way to prevent victimization. Studies have shown that for every dollar invested in prevention, we save $7 that would otherwise be spent on after victimization occurs, on policing, courts, prisons, and victim services. This literature also clearly shows that investing more in children and youth makes for safer communities when they become adults. There are elementary and secondary schools struggling mightily right now in our overstretched public schools. And kids, like those my partner Grace works with, that can have a future, kids that should be having more opportunities but don't, kids that get suspended, kids that get expelled, kids that get in trouble, kids that end up criminalized, kids that end up in youth detention, kids that turn into adults who end up in prison. If we don't build communities instead of cages, it's those kids that are underserved by our local schools that'll be locked up in the Kemptville prison. $30.4 million a year would give more than 35,000 children access to breakfast, snack, and lunch programs in our school. $30.4 million a year could address food insecurity and child hunger in Ontario, one of the richest jurisdictions in the world, by establishing over 2,500 community gardens. With the funds earmarked for the Kemptville prison, the prison could invest more in education, not incarceration, and hire 340 teachers. They could hire 450 educational assistants to work with people, work with kids who have needs. We could provide 15,200 children and youth with one-on-one mentoring. We could provide over 33,000 youth with 6 weeks of leadership training. We could hire over 5,600 youth for 9 weeks of full-time summer work at $15 an hour, which should be the minimum wage now, but isn't because of other choices the Ford government has made that defy compassion, fairness, and logic. With $30.4 million a year, we could pay college tuition and fees for over 4,400 people, or pay university tuition fees for nearly 3,000 people that are going to need retraining after this pandemic. The province could invest more in care, not cages, and expand access to harm reduction for over 2,000 people in the midst of an overdose epidemic that's now killing thousands in this province every year. With $30.4 million a year, we could provide 1,600 people with 30 days of drug treatment with 1 year of aftercare. With this money, we could provide intensive case management for over 2,200 people living with significant mental health issues that often end up in our jails. With this money, we could hire 730 peer support workers who have previously dealt with drug use and mental health issues to work with people living with those issues now. We could also provide for over 200,000 hours of counseling, which I think we could probably all use right now amidst this pandemic that has taken a toll on all of us, especially in prison people we've subjected to torturous segregation-like conditions in the name of public health for weeks, or sometimes even more than a month at a time during outbreaks and suspected outbreaks in prisons across this province, including the Ottawa Carleton Detention Center. These are folks who are eventually going to return to live amongst us. The province could also invest in justice that transforms rather than harms people by allocating $30.4 million a year to process over 1,600 cases outside of our clogged courts. So I would submit to you that any combination of the above would do more to enhance community well-being and safety in North Grenville and Eastern Ontario than building a new prison in Kemptville alongside other jail infrastructure projects the province has planned in this region. Just to close, a few weeks ago, I made the trip down the 416, the same road that will be used to ship and displace people from Ottawa to the Kemptville prison. People who in most cases have experienced trauma, poverty, homelessness, drug and mental health issues, racism, and other challenges all too present in our communities. I made this trip down the 416 to visit the 182-acre parcel of land off Prescott Road with members of the Coalition Against the Proposed Prison based in Kemptville to imagine what a decarceral future could look like.
10 minutes?
Yep. And in the hours we spent together walking through the farm grounds and the Kemptville College campus across the street, we also contemplated what it would mean to build a prison on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin territory that will contribute to the hyper-incarceration of Indigenous people instead of demanding the province offer to give the land back to Indigenous people as part of reconciliation efforts. Now, some may dismiss what I'm saying that's been informed by 15 years of research as being unfair, But I can assure you, as someone that once worked for the RCMP and the Correctional Service of Canada half my lifetime ago, that I arrived at my present stance vis-a-vis prisons because of the evidence and my experience. I can also say that it's the unfairness everyone participating in this meeting should be most concerned about, which is siphoning resources that belong to our kids. It belongs to our kids, every single penny. And it's currently being earmarked to lock up a number of them at the Kemptville prison in 2027 if we allow it to be built and opened without a fight, based on past successful campaigns that we know can stop new prisons. After all, we're here tonight because advocates based in Ottawa, myself included, oppose the construction of a new and bigger 725-bed jail to replace the Ottawa Carleton Detention Centre, which was announced by the previous provincial government in 2017, which is now morphed, unfortunately, into this current plan. So my apologies for contributing to that. So to end, as an Ontario taxpayer and Eastern Ontario resident, I urge you to tell Premier Ford and MPP Clark to say no to prison expansion, Ontario prison expansion, to say not in any backyard, and to say yes to equity and supports, yes to environmental sustainability. We don't need to invest in more costly, unjust, and ineffective prisons. It's 2021. We need to build communities, not cages. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Piche. We appreciated your presentation very much. Thank you. So we'll hear from one more presenter before we take a 15-minute break. And that is Ms. Lorraine Reckmans. I believe she's with us this evening.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you perfectly. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'd like to start by doing a land acknowledgement. I'd like to thank the Creator for this Algonquin territory on which we're meeting, and respect to the land, because at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about land. So I'd like to say that I'm here in my capacity as an Indigenous woman who is a matriarch in a matrilineal society, and as an Anishinaabe of Ojibwe, Algonquin, and French heritage, I have a responsibility to speak for land in which my grandchildren have an interest. So my rights are inherent, which means they come directly from the Creator in my teachings, which gives me the authority to speak. So Miigwech, I'd like to say thank you to the previous speakers. I share many of the concerns that were expressed earlier, but I want to talk about Algonquin territory specifically. This is what people call unceded Algonquin territory. I'm going to suggest that we just call it Algonquin territory without the qualifier of unceded, because using the word unceded diminishes the fact that this territory has never been ceded by treaty, which means that Algonquin rights and titles continue to exist in this area. What spurred me to get engaged actually wasn't so much about the societal and economic concerns of a prison, but it really was Doug Ford's own words within the proposed development when they identified the site as having no third-party interest, which I found astounding, considering that Ontario is now in the process of negotiating a land settlement agreement with the Algonquins of Ontario. So my sense was that Leeds, Grenville, and Kemptville in particular actually got off quite easy with regards to this settlement, because there was only one proposed parcel of settlement lands identified in the treaty negotiations. And that parcel was parcel 366, which were lands that were held and managed by OMAFRA that previously supported agricultural programs. So in a recent report on the land claim agreement, there was an additional parcel of agricultural land that was identified in Alfred that was added to the list of settlement lands. And I thought it was interesting that the province of Ontario maintained that it has and had jurisdiction over this parcel, even whilst it was negotiating land settlement arrangements with the Algonquins of Ontario. I found it troubling that this site wasn't offered up as a parcel for settlement lands. Now consider that 36,000 square kilometers in Eastern Ontario are subject to Algonquin interest and title. And consider the size of the parcel, number 366, on Concession Road, that is probably about 250 meters wide, being offered up as part of a settlement piece in the land claim agreement. People spoke earlier about Indigenous people being marginalized and subjected to racism and being overrepresented in the correctional institutions. And I think tonight I'm here as likely the only Indigenous voice that you're going to hear on this matter. So I would like you to consider that. I would like you to consider that many people are talking about housing, and certainly there's a lot of societal pressures to use that land for something other than a correctional facility, to use the land for community support or community-driven initiative. But I'd like you to consider that this parcel is part of a territory that belongs to the Algonquin people who have not been consulted. I didn't want to speak too long. I don't even think I'll take up 10 minutes of your time, but there are some things that I would like you to consider. So if you would consider that Indigenous people are targeted and racialized and incarcerated, wouldn't you rather want to welcome them to the area, to a settlement land, than to a correctional institution? Considering that this is the ancestral home of their people, I think it's an alternative. I'd really just like to suggest that I am for reconciliation. I am for peaceful coexistence. I am for recompense and trying to right the wrongs of the past and teach our children that there's a better way forward. I would like to be for a movement that would pressure the province of Ontario to identify this parcel in the land claim settlement with the Algonquins of Ontario. I don't speak for the Algonquins of Ontario, but I really think it would be tremendous goodwill on the part of the people of North Grenville to ask that this parcel be offered up to the original people to whom it belongs. So, I mean, given that this pandemic has demonstrated to us our shortcomings as a society, where all the gaps exist, with whether it's healthcare, whether it's our judicial system, our community supports, the precarious wages that people are being paid, unaffordability of housing. I think this is a tremendous time in our history to start taking a different approach to how we treat land and how we treat each other, but also to send a strong signal that the people of this community support reconciliation. Given that North Grenville has been nearly completely unimpacted by any of the arrangements made within the settlement agreement, this would really be a small offering. But I think it would speak volumes to our intent as people to coexist and maybe right some of the wrongs of the past. And it is a positive, I think is a really positive suggestion. It doesn't speak to any of the other issues that people, brought up about the lack of rehabilitation or the lack of support, but it'll go far. What can we do really locally for Indigenous people and reconciliation? That is within our control, that is within our purview as people who live in this municipality. So that's the suggestion that I would like to make. I know that I have scheduled time to speak with council in April, where I would like to speak more in depth about Indigenous rights and what title means. But for the time being, I'm just asking something very simple. Stop using the word unceded. We don't identify land as ceded. You know, I mean, ceded just basically means that it's been given up through treaty. So when we put the qualifier unceded on this land, we're diminishing the title. We're diminishing the fact that this is Algonquin land at the end of the day. So I'll leave it there. And as being the only, probably the only Indigenous voice in the village, at least to date, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention. And I hope you give serious consideration to this opportunity. So we're good.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Rankmans, for your presentation. We really appreciate it. Thank you for bringing a valuable voice to the discussion, as all the presentations have been to date. Okay, so for those tuning in to watch the presentations and to council colleagues and staff, we are taking a 15-minute recess at the present time to regroup, get a glass of water, stretch your legs, do whatever you need to do. So I'm just going to check the time, and it's 7:48. So we'll be back on, Heather, at 8:03. So we will stick to 15 minutes. Thank you. So you can just mute and stop your video for those who want to walk away from their computer screens. Strongly advise that you mute and stop your video. Thank you.
Auction 400. In 2020, a signed original pair of Nike Air Bees worn in play in 1985 netted $560,000 at auction. Yes, Mom. What are Jordans? Yes. Sold at auction 800. In 1990, exactly 100 years after it was painted, this artist's portrait of Dr. Gachet sold for $82.5 million. Yes, Catherine.
Who's Picasso?
No. Vincent van Gogh painted Dr. Gachet. Back to you, Mom. Sold at auction 1200. Someone laid down $960,000 for his Blackie guitar, which he played on Lay Down Sally. Amal. Who is Clapton? Correct. Sold at auction 16. In 1993, this Texas billionaire and presidential candidate got himself a Soyuz space capsule for $1.7 million. Yes, Amal. Who is Perot? That's correct. He was storing it until they had a museum. They could save it. Sold at auction 2000. You have under a minute left. Christie's recently offered art, objects, and of course, photos from this late former husband of Princess Margaret. What is Lord Snowden? Back to you, Mom. Number one lyrics 800. In a Beatles song, this two-word title precedes "Don't Make It Bad." Amal. What is Hey Jude? Correct. Number one lyrics 1200. These light the corners of my mind in the theme from The Way We Were. Yes, Claire.
What are memories?
Hi, Heather. Are we live?
We are live, just waiting for everyone to come off of break, and that would be now.
Okay. Okay, great. So welcome back, everyone. We, of course, are here this evening for our special council meeting focused specifically on the correctional facility. And we have just completed 5 of 9 planned presentations from individuals and organizations. So next we have Mairead Frizzell and Kirk Elbert from the Jail Opposition Group. I understand, Kirk, I just saw your email in regards to extra time. I know that you and Mairead are sharing the time, so do your best, but if you need a couple of extra minutes without setting too much of a precedent, we'll do our best to accommodate that. I know a number of our staff and council colleagues, myself included, have some childcare responsibilities later in the evening, but we're absolutely happy to do what we can to make sure that you feel heard. Okay, so we'll pass it over to Ms. Frizzell and Mr. Elbert from the Jail Opposition Group.
Thank you, Mayor Nancy, and thank you everyone for attending and for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Jail Opposition Group. So I'm going to start this off and then Kirk will follow for this presentation. I just want to point out that this meeting didn't happen by accident. It was brought forth by consistent and labored efforts of both JOG and CAP and many community members who are voicing their concerns. I'd also like to point out that this is now happening after 7 full months since the announcement of the Greater Ottawa Correctional Complex. And no, I'm not confused when I say Ottawa. I am actually using the exact language that was used in the announcement of the correctional facility that will be located on 182 acres of provincially owned land across from the Kemptville campus on County Road 44. Qualifying Kemptville as a mere suburb of Ottawa is only the beginning of the indifferent handling of this large-scale provincial file that will have a direct and lasting impact on our community. In a November 5th, 2020 article in the Ottawa Citizen, Mayor Peckford noted, "There is no doubt some division in our community, so we have to listen hard and ask the ministry for the answers to these questions people are asking and go from there." I'm actually a music teacher, and as much as we play music, we also listen to music. I teach my students to listen. The various listening exercises enrich the students' ability to play their instrument with more fluency and with an audience in mind. So today we are asking this mayor and council, along with the Ontario Solicitor General, Sylvia Jones, and especially our MPP, Steve Clark, to do just that, listen. But don't stop there. Please take what these residents, your constituents, are telling you, and then apply it to what you learned here today and over the past several months to the current situation. While we understand that the decision to build a correctional facility in Kemptville was made by the provincial government, we are here today to voice our concerns to you, our elected municipal government as well, to help better inform your response. We feel that our efforts at a provincial level have fallen on deaf ears. Many of the groups on here today will have already critiqued the municipality's response, so I don't need to continue on that thread. Instead, I'm interested in getting answers to better inform all residents of North Grenville. There is a lot of misinformation and rumor in this small town, and that can only be combated with facts and reality. I'm interested in having council attend to all of the information that is presented here today, and I can see that there's a wealth of it. So again, I thank all the speakers for presenting. So not to cherry pick or refute data, but to respond to the provincial government using the people's voice. The following is only some of the main concerns that JOG has with a correctional facility in Kemptville. So first off, there's a huge lack of transparency since the announcement in August, all the way to the public engagement sessions. It has been months, and so far there are no answers from the Solicitor General's meeting or the November 26th, stakeholders meeting. JOG has requested a copy of an impact study by the province and has again been met with no response. There has been a request to have a list of considered properties. And again, that has not materialized months after the request. This all amounts to a gross display of disrespect for the citizens of North Grenville, and to such a degree that it can't simply be shrugged off in casual conversation with neighbors, nor in heated online debates with keyboard warriors, which might be a Kemptville favorite pastime. Number two, the presence of a prison in downtown Kemptville represents a loss of vision for Kemptville's future. Last fall, the municipality released an extraordinary vision for the Kemptville campus, over 600 acres across from the proposed prison. And it included outdoor amphitheater for the Kemptville Live and other concerts, vibrant educational hub, agricultural land, markets, community gardens, ecotourism, miles of maintained trails over diverse landscapes, sports fields, and art installations. All now in the shadow of a prison. A few blocks down, a work in progress Main Street struggling through the pandemic, like the rest of us, except with more dire consequences. If there ever is a time to work toward a brighter future, it is now. And up until August 2020, nobody's definition of that included a prison. So why then support it? And if not support it, why not loudly oppose it? That is my question to the mayor and council. Third point, the current provincial government has a history of top-down governance, and this has been gone into with other speakers as well. I just want to point out that Steve Clark, our MPP and the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, has used ministerial zoning orders, MZOs, 43 times over the last 3 years, compared to the previous government using it 19 times over a span of 10 years. So it's a very big difference. So I do understand that it doesn't affect our predicament. MZO couldn't be used in this case, but simply knowing that this government uses a heavy hand when forcing development should be very concerning for all of us and for our council. The province has another history though, and that is the retraction of large changes and announcements where there is public outcry. JOG feels that our voices have not been heard by the provincial government, but also by the municipal government. Having our leaders' support could change the trajectory of this province's plan very quickly. Does our mayor and council recognize this, along with the Ford government's trend of retractions? And if not, what is stopping them from having a clear stance on this project? Next point is, what will taxpayers, that's all of us, be left on the hook for? Despite the Solicitor General's repeated vows that this will not cost our tax base anything, we have none of this in writing. We do not know how the facility will impact us 5, 10, 25 years down the road after construction. How will the local police budget, which is currently the second largest line in the municipal budget at 2.4 million, be impacted? We already pay for a police service that is constantly drawn to enforcement on the 416, and not a lot of presence within North Grenville due to that. And how will they adapt when there is a prison here? And one of my final points, the non-founded economic benefits. So they're often touted. However, when I hear people in the community who either support or are neutral on the prison proposal, they often cite jobs as a benefit, which echoes the talking points of the provincial government, a promise of over 500 jobs. But the fact is that these jobs are spread over 5 years and across the entire province. There is no guarantee of how many will materialize here. In the November 26th Solicitor General's meeting, the province indicated that the OCDC in Ottawa would send their current and future staff to the site here in Kemptville. Furthermore, construction contracts are not often awarded to small town companies. For example, Bayfield Manor, that contract was awarded to a company in Cornwall. While there may be temporary uptick for some businesses during construction, like fast food and coffee shops, which is not really the mom and pop shops along the main street, it will be short-lived. And that to me doesn't justify the long-term impact of the entire project. So in closing, I would like to thank the mayor and the council for agreeing to host this meeting. The ongoing dialogue is very much appreciated and important. I hope you all recognize that the people speaking here today represent not only ourselves, but many who can't or are unwilling to come forward. At the present time, we have roughly 200 members in JOG, and all of that is completely grassroots. without any money spent to further our cause over the past 6 months. Oh, and what I told you earlier about being a music teacher, it's absolutely true, but there's one thing I left out. My students are children, ages 3 and up, preschools, kinders, oldest ones no more than 13. So I am imploring you once again to do what they do. Listen hard, as Mayor Peckford promised to do, and then apply what you learn here today. Your constituents are listening, watching, and expecting your leadership on this file. Thanks for your time. I'll hand it over to Kirk.
10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much for considering my additional time request. And thank you for Mariad for your comments. There will be a little bit of repetition. I'll try to make sure that if I can, I'll kind of swing past that. I want to start by thanking the mayor and the council for agreeing to schedule this meeting based on requests from concerned residents. This is something that the residents have wanted for quite some time. As Mariad said, it's been almost 7 months since the announcement by the province, and it still remains unclear what the prospective concerns and interests exist within council, how they feel independently and collectively. The residents of Kemptville deserve to know. Good evening. My name is Kirk Albert. I have lived in this area for my entire life. I'm proud to live here, and I love many of the things it has to offer. I rarely have been involved with political decisions to date. However, the announcement made during the pandemic on August 27th of 2020 to build a prison in Kemptville immediately caught my attention. It compelled me to seek more information because it didn't make sense that a rural town of roughly 4,000 residents would now be the destination for a facility built to maximum security standards, which would hold 235 inmates. I discovered that in Ontario, a prison of this size and capacity only existed in cities with large populations, significant infrastructure and social supports. Thunder Bay, 132 inmates and population in excess of 127,000. Milton, 124 inmates, population in excess of 101,000. Sudbury, 185 inmates, population in excess of 161,000 people. And Brampton, 220 inmates, and a population in excess of 735,000. There are a couple smaller cities with prisons in Ontario, but they too have populations in excess of 20,000. The announcement soon became known, after the announcement that the province made it with no consultation or transparency with our local government or residents. On several occasions, our mayor and council publicly stated they knew nothing about it. The ministry stated they had been working on the plan for years and that they were 1.5 years behind their implementation plan. It did, however, start to answer questions as to why MPP Steve Clark evaded attempts by the North Grenville municipality to purchase the land. It's too bad that the intentions for the land weren't shared during those discussions. The provincial announcement focused on 2 key factors: 1, local and economic benefits, and 2, employment. The luster of the prosperous claims wore off quickly when it was realized that large construction firms are selected in P3 proposals, and they bring their staff complement with them, and they also leave with them afterwards. The focus then shifted to potentially buying meals, coffee, and perhaps hospitality services, or potential subcontracting work like grass cutting and snow removal. So the narrative changed to some local purchasing that wouldn't be sustained or statistically significant. Additionally, when discussion focused on a potential real estate surge from correctional officers moving permanently to Kemptville as the new prison town, it was identified that many of the correctional officers lived in proximity to the Kemptville location. Therefore, little need would exist to relocate and purchase a home in Kemptville. Again, the narrative changed to a marginal chance of positive real estate impact. These realizations that transcended to the second stated key factor of employment for Kemptville. 500 new jobs was announced, only to realize that the ministry intended to transfer its existing staff complement to the Kemptville location from OCDC. And this was supported by a heat map graphic shown by the ministry on November 26th, stated as one of the key reasons for selecting Kemptville for the facility in the first place. To put it simply, new net jobs will be negligible. The August 2020 statement announced by the province was echoed to Kemptville residents as 500 local jobs. There was optimism and enthusiasm by some, only to realize that it was in fact not 500 local jobs, but as Mediad mentioned, 500 jobs across the entire province of Ontario and over a 5-year period. Our mayor and council have since realized that the provincial announcement for local jobs and economic benefits has been overstated. Unfortunately, many residents still believe the statement of 500 local jobs, local government jobs, to be accurate. We requested that the mayor and council publicly retract statements about the 500 local jobs for Kemptville based on the fact they were inaccurate and misleading. To my knowledge, the retraction has yet to occur.
15 minutes.
So I ask if the two key factors showcased in the announcement, that being 1, local and economic benefits, and 2, employment, have been proven to be misnomers and have been debunked, what is left to showcase? I'd like to shift now to the October 30th and November sessions where the Ministry of the Solicitor General presented information they had regarding the announcement. In those meetings, many questions were asked about economics, risks, impacts, infrastructure plans and needs, site selection, ongoing tax burdens to the residents, and the list goes on. The ministry, in fact, requested questions in advance of the November 26th session, of which many were put forth. I put forth close to 30 myself. These have not been responded to, and almost 4 months has passed since responses were promised. We want to know what the delay is. Promises were made to reply with frequently asked questions type document, plus other information in response to the thoughtful and informed questions that our residents raised. A lack of response is also true of multiple requests made to Infrastructure Ontario requesting property information that has been part of the public domain previously regarding the portfolios of Ontario land and provincial land deemed surplus. These have not been supplied. Additionally, due to the lack of answers provided, a Freedom of Information request was made to the ministry on November 27th of 2020. It was acknowledged as received on December 10th of 2020 by the ministry. The information request was specific to the 100 to 130 properties that the ministry stated that they had assessed and eliminated from their selection process, ultimately and shockingly landing on the Kemptville site. I don't want to speculate why it takes 4 months to provide information that should be readily accessible in an electronic format already, but nonetheless, the delay is problematic. Even without the land details, you don't have to look far. You only have to drive a few kilometers down Highway 416 south from Kemptville, and you will find 91 acres of vacant provincial land directly beside Highway 416. Was it part of their site assessment? Why did the land not meet the criteria that they mentioned as being close to 416 highway and in proximity to the homes of their staff? What about Russell Road in Ottawa, just 15 minutes from OCDC? They stated they were in competitive bidding with private sector entities, but if we were looking at it economically, how much money would be saved by transporting staff, inmates, contractors, equipment, etc., just down the road, as opposed to roughly 55 minutes to Kemptville? But despite efforts to confirm the ministry's statements, we wait. Provincial land also exists at the OCD facility in Ottawa, where there is in fact a very large land parcel available. So why not expand there? There is an enormous province. Ontario is an enormous province made up of 124 provincial ridings. Why does this riding, Steve Clark's riding of Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes, stand to receive not its first or second, but in fact its third correctional facility? There is significant provincial surplus land, and yet Kemptville's location was selected within a stone's throw of what had already been projected to be the new community hub of the town for generations to come. Out of 100 to 130 properties, it was selected as a best fit. It makes little sense, and we eagerly await the data from the ministry to better understand how this occurred. If a correctional facility brings such obvious benefits to its surrounding municipality as stated, I wonder why no other mayors have stepped forward to say, listen, if Kemptville is opposed to the prison, we invite it here. Next, I would like to speak to mitigating risks, impact studies, feasibility studies, quantitative data to mitigate risks, not just to the municipality, but to the tax-paying residents, its businesses, and other stakeholders. This data must be made available. Yes.
I'm just gonna, at 20 minutes, we'll have to move on. So I think you have about 2 minutes to wrap up if you can. Thank you.
Okay, I will.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Proceeding without data to support the areas of concern, those being health services, policing, infrastructure, traffic, construction, etc., is irresponsible. I'm going to skip ahead of a few things just in the interest of time. I'm going to have to skip way ahead here. Okay, so I'll close by saying, as a taxpayer in Ontario, I know money is badly needed in many different areas, including education, health and wellness, pandemic relief and recovery. Alternatively, if the funding was redirected within the portfolio of corrections and/or judicial affairs, it should be spent on reform, social support, substance abuse, housing, important root causes to criminal activity that aren't new, but haven't been dealt with adequately. Kemptville will make headlines for years to come because it didn't push back on the ministry to get its affairs in order first and simply focused on leveraging as much out of the province for the town that focus really misses the point, representing the will of the residents you're elected to represent. Okay, pardon me for 1 second. I'm just going to skip ahead. We were promised
do have to move on, so just maybe 30
answers.
seconds. Thanks.
Okay, very good. Without question, many residents want the province to reconsider its plan. The cost of the location, the lack of local benefits, the lack of transparency of the announcement, and the list goes on. In closing, I would like to again thank the mayor and council for agreeing to host the meeting. I hope you recognize that, as Mariad said, we are speaking on behalf of many. The future of our community should be shaped by those that live within it, not by people that don't even know where it is. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry to cut you off. We're just trying to be extremely fair to everyone, but there's certainly an opportunity to make sure your comments are inputted into that input email, Kirk, so that we can pass them on right in all of their substance to the province and certainly the ministry. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We'll move on then. We have another group, Save the Land, and we have Marie-Therese Vucinos and Alison Toms. And I think I want to apologize to Mairead, who I think goes by Mariad. Could you just, Mariad, let us know?
No, you got it right. You have it correct. It is Mairead.
Okay, thank you. I know there are multiple pronunciations. I would have felt badly if I was using the wrong one consistently.
No problem.
And I do apologize to both of you. I know how thoughtful Jog is being in many of these matters, and I really apologize for cutting you off. I hate doing it. I've just promised my council colleagues that I would do my best to be as fair as possible. So I would really strongly encourage you to submit the fullness of your comments to that input email so that we can benefit from all of them. Thank you so much. So I'll move on then. I think we have Marie-Therese and Alison with us. And again, we're just appealing for fairness here. Obviously, we gave the co-presenters of the previous group a little bit of extra time. We can do the same for you, but we cannot go beyond 20 minutes. Thank you.
All right. I'm talking to you tonight as a biologist and agrologist and a concerned citizen.
And Marie-Therese, if I might, your audio isn't great. I don't know if you can speak a little closer to the mic, perhaps. Thank you.
How's this?
It's a little bit better. Give it a shot.
Yeah, I don't have a great connection here, so hopefully I won't have any interruptions.
Okay, that's a bit better. Thank you. You can also cut your camera if it's feeling dicey, and that way we'll hear you without necessarily seeing you.
Okay,
but give it a shot. Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry to say that yes, I'm talking to you also as a concerned citizen, as well as a biologist and an agrologist. The Ford government's plan to build a prison on the Kemptville College farm, I'm sorry to say, is misguided and short-sighted. And I'm going to tell you why. It would involve the sacrifice of hundreds of acres of prime farmland. Farmland is a non-renewable resource, and good farmland is not abundant in this municipality. We need it to preserve our capacity to feed ourselves, our children, and our children's children. It's prime land because of its proximity to a grower consumer base. It's prime land and because of the quality and fertility of the soil there, which makes it suitable for fruit and vegetable production. Excuse me. As well as many other types of production, which are not possible on the usual parcel of farmland that is seen in this municipality. So it's bad news to lose this land for agricultural production. The construction of the proposed prison would also involve the obliteration of all the barns and outbuildings on the property. But we do need this building infrastructure to develop agricultural projects on the rest of the farmland owned by the municipality, and that in the near future. We need the bar arena, which is part of those buildings, because it is part of the fabric of the local farming community and part of the fabric of this town. The bar arena usually hosts numerous events that cannot be hosted elsewhere in the municipality. It's a unique facility. It hosts agricultural fairs, shows, auctions, recreational events. Some of you may remember the medieval fairs we've had there in the past with knights, demonstrations of knights jousting on horseback, and demonstrations of longbow archery. It's a great venue for sporting and educational events. It also plays a major role in tourism here. We cannot lose the bar arena. The land in question belongs to the Indigenous people of this area. They deserve a voice in what happens there. We owe it to them and all our citizens to see this land protected and used to improve food sovereignty, for example, and as a chance to improve food security in the area. The establishment of community gardens is one example of a simple low-cost project that would improve access to healthy foods for low-income households. There are many more kinds of such projects that could take place on that farm, all within walking or cycling distance of Kemptville. Food insecurity has increased dramatically because of COVID-19. We do have a means here to improve the situation with the use of this farm and in sustainable ways. You may have heard on CBC that the local food movement is taking off. There are not enough small farms to supply the demand for local fresh foods. Kemptville College Farm has the land for local food agriculture. New farmers who want to start small farms have a real problem gaining access to good land due to its prohibitive cost and rare availability. There is a solution for that. The college farm could provide training and land rental agreements like is done in the green belts of Ottawa, Toronto, and elsewhere. CSAs, that is community-supported agriculture businesses, are a popular type of small farm business. These are small farms that grow and supply boxes of fresh farm produce weekly to participating households for a fixed seasonal fee. The college farm is ideally suited for this and even has a building equipped for washing and packing produce. I'm concerned about the environmental impacts of the prison project. A prison project where inmates and staff come in from elsewhere every day, where construction workers and materials are all imported, as well as food and supplies once it is finished. This will result in increased emissions, a reduced ability to fight climate change in this area, and also, very importantly, in a reduction in the air quality within a kilometer of the prison project. Compare that to a community farm project using a farm that is already there, that can be used to develop local food production initiatives, all within walking or cycling distance from Kemptville, that can provide employment and land to a new generation of farmers, that can develop agritourism initiatives such as pick your own operations or regional specialty products. In this case, emissions are negligible. There would be no increase. The sustainability of such a project is much better. There are numerous models of sustainable community farms that already exist, as well as grants and startup programs. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We would be better off to target development of projects that will reduce net emissions rather than increase them unnecessarily. Projects with social equity components to fill urgent needs, prevention instead of incarceration. Projects that will spread the wealth of the land around various layers of the community, including our Indigenous people, rather than benefit one or two major conglomerates. By transitioning this farm into a community farm with small business components, social components, agritourism components, we take care of a lot of needs in this community, and this would be the best use of this land. Losing the agricultural college has been a hard blow for this community. Losing the farm with all its potential for local food initiatives and tourism would be to add insult to injury. We can do better than that. Together with Allison Toms and another concerned citizen, we are forming a group called Save the Land Kemptville. Allison will be telling you all about that and more. Thank you. And to you, Allison.
Thank you, Mary.
10 minutes.
Thank you. I'll keep it short. I just want to thank the mayor and councillors, members of administration, and the public for this opportunity to speak to you about our new Save the Land Kemptville, protecting Kemptville College's heritage farm, buildings, and the land. So as Mary-Therese mentioned, a few of us started this little new initiative as an offshoot to the Coalition Against the Proposed Prison, who we're going to hear from very shortly, because we wanted to highlight the agricultural alternatives for this farm-side acreage. We know it consists of almost 200 acres of land, plus several important and very workable farm buildings. We are going to be building a website, which is going to house information that is out there in the public domain right now, but widely scattered over social media sites, newspapers, and other traditional media and websites. Our goal is to show and highlight alternative uses for the land and the farm buildings that better align with North Grenville's agricultural heritage, history and traditions, and which bring healthy economic benefits to the community. We've heard already tonight about the unhealthy jobs, the environmental impacts of building a prison on even a portion of the site would bring. We want to highlight what could be the positive. So we all cannot debate at this point before contracts are awarded about how much real dollars will be coming into Kemptville and North Grenville due to the construction and ongoing maintenance. But I put to you that life is more than just all about money when there's so many greater needs. So we want you to think about other economics and health benefits. So there are, as Mary Therese said, lots of alternatives for this land. And I want to also mention, as Ms. Frizzell did, that we're in the process of developing a healthy tourism strategy. So why not bring people in to our community to events on that land? So I want to speak particularly about the one event that has already been announced, and that is the Ontario Ploughmen's Association is planning their 104th International Ploughing Match and Rural Expo, which is going to be held now in September of 2022. So at the risk of getting this wrong, I'm actually going to quote Mayor Peckford, because you were quoted in March 2020 Agri-News. This is a publication from Eastern Ontario. And you said, as they quoted, that although Kemptville campus will never again be an agricultural college, you publicly stated your commitment to bringing agriculture back in some form and recognize the symbolic value of hosting the International Ploughing Match on the site. So also, timely enough, for those of you who have not yet seen our MPP Clark's latest winter update, there it is. He actually, I'm going to quote him too in here. He actually has a little piece about the International Ploughing Match. And I'm going to say that, and I'm going to read directly from his newsletter. The Ploughing Match is an incredible opportunity for us to highlight our region's rich agricultural history and to show the world that we remain on the leading edge of food production and agribusiness innovation. The event will bring tens of thousands of visitors, an economic boost and creating new opportunities for investment that will benefit Leeds and Grenville for years to come, just hot off the presses. So I also looked through the meeting minutes of our municipal council's advisory committee on agricultural and rural affairs, and the chairman of the International Ploughing Match, Mr. Harry Bennett, also talked about and this is directly from the minutes, that the event shares information outside of just plowing, including the rural lifestyle, the culture of agriculture, and knowledge sharing on food resources and production. The event draws up to 40,000 visitors, including those who come to enjoy exhibitions, entertainment, and RV parking. So imagine the economic benefits that the Kemptville Live Festival has brought to Kemptville over the past few years. And imagine this happening for us. Further, Mr. Bennett actually stated that profits from the Ploughing Match are distributed back to the community through hospital and youth organizations.
15 minutes.
So I just want to also briefly mention that if these are workable buildings, we can imagine the arena being used for horse shows. We can imagine our rural summit. We're making a commitment to try to hold that summit regularly every few years, how we could use some of the buildings for demos and exhibits. And also, as has been announced, Kemptville campus is going to see a return of the Agricultural Technician Trades Program. And so imagine how they might be able to take advantage of some of the buildings. So in closing, I want to say, with a little imagination, and some vision, we could use all of the farm side land and buildings in a way that enhances our community's heritage, history, and traditions of agriculture and draw people to North Grenville. So I also want to do a plug for our website, which is going to be coming up soon, and we'll announce it in social media, in which we are going to house a lot of information so that you can go out and learn about a good alternative for this land. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you to both of you. And again, thank you for your patience with us on the time constraints we're all under, but appreciate you staying under those 20 minutes. Thank you again. And we look forward to hearing more. Looks like we will be. And I should say that there will be more news about the international plowing match. Shortly, there was a logo reveal convened today by the IPM organizing committee. So they will be launching the logo. They kind of did a soft launch today, but I think you'll see more news coming in the weeks and months ahead about what is now our IPM 2022 event. So you are absolutely correct, Allison. There's a ton of excitement and a lot of momentum, and we're very pleased to have ensured, again, with MPP Steve Clark's leadership in this instance, that in fact, they will be able to access the farm side lands for the purpose of that event. So some of those buildings that you talk about, they will in fact be using for exhibitions and other things, which is obviously very exciting given the size and the significance of the event. Okay, we're gonna move on to Mr. Paul Cormier, please. And Mr. Cormier, you of course have 15 minutes. We've been a little more generous to our co-presenters, but we'd ask that you stick to the 15 minutes just out of fairness for our other presenters. Thanks so much.
I'll plan on being short. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, your audio is great.
Good.
I expect you don't have video. We're not seeing any. Is that right?
Yeah, the bandwidth at the farm here is a little iffy.
Understood. That's okay. Thanks.
So thanks very much to you all for organizing this important forum, and it's on no less than the future of Kemptville and North Grenville. So Paul Cormier, you may know of our family's restaurant, Salamanders of Kemptville. It's become a kind of a community institution in its past 12 years of continuous operation in beautiful downtown Kemptville. What you may not know much about is Rana Development. It's a company that works nationally and internationally on the psychology and management of change inside companies and communities. So for example, right now we're currently working with the Atlantic Police Academy and Selected Police Services on a community safety engagement model. It's an approach to joint police and community planning that aims to enhance understanding, collaboration between the police and the communities that they serve. Now, I'm just offering this as a backdrop to any thought that I or the company of which I am chair might be inclined to resist change. We actually help manage change. Having said that, we will always oppose change that is not supported by evidence or is not supported by those who need to go through it, or in this case, suffer it. Now, earlier speakers covered quite a bit of what I wish to say. However, I'm happy and honored to reinforce their eloquence. All right, so as subject matter experts in the management of change since 1993, we oppose the establishment of a prison in North Grenville for 3 reasons. First reason for opposing this ill-advised move is that Ontario has no need of more prisons, as has been stated by previous speakers, including Dr. Aaron Doyle. In an era where many countries are recognizing that incarceration in closed institutions is not effective and it's a thing of the past, it seems inappropriate for a province to build yet another one. The rate of recidivism in Ontario for 15-16 was 37%, based on the narrow provincial definition of, get this, a return to provincial correctional supervision on a new conviction within 2 years of completing probation, parole, or conditional sentence, or a provincial jail sentence of 6 months or more. Okay, well, a wider definition, that's a pretty higher rate of return to crime. Recently, somebody asked me, don't you think it would be great that North Grenville had a state-of-the-art penitentiary providing jobs and economic benefit to the community? And my response was as follows. There are no penitentiaries that are state-of-the-art. They are built solely on past practice. So-called correctional institutions don't correct. They become schools of criminality. particularly for young offenders. There's no economic benefit to a community of having a prison within its limits. All construction is done on a butt-ugly, cookie-cutter pattern by firms located outside of the municipality. Most employees will be transferred in from other prisons. Due to the training required in any event, it's highly unlikely they would settle in North Grenville rather than commute to their home, for example, in Ottawa. Now, Dr. Doyle has already filled us in on the psychological problems many prison personnel suffer from. Some of the incentive for building a prison in North Grenville is to offload the City of Ottawa of its prison burden, its so-called capacity pressures. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to believe that the current provincial government could easily undertake to amalgamate our municipality to Ottawa, since they have the power to do so, and we have nothing to say about it. That's how powerless we appear to be. Prisons are a notorious tax drain. As of 2018, according to StatsCan, we had a different figure from Dr. Piché, but according to StatsCan, it's $125,000 a year to keep an inmate incarcerated. Amanda Giles shared some other staggering figures from across the country with us earlier. We're talking billions. So on top of the construction costs, you can just imagine what kind of social programs we might be able to put in place to deal with, for example, the disproportionate number of Indigenous peoples incarcerated in prisons across Canada and Ontario. This situation has been called a national travesty, and Dr. Piché alluded to this in his eloquent review of that situation. Finally, it's now well known, and it's been mentioned already by Briony Baxter and reinforced by Dr. Doyle, that the Ontario court system is busted. If reformed, there would be ample, perhaps even excess space for inmates in current institutions. Far too many individuals are on remand awaiting trials in current jails, and so rather than waste money on the consequences of a poor court system, why wouldn't we invest in rebuilding it? I'm reminded of the great columnist Bill Vaughan's famous quote, "Our court's dockets are so crowded today, it would be better to refer to it as the overdue process of law." Our second reason for opposing the construction and operation of a prison in North Grenville is the history of the current Ontario government in making ill-advised decisions. You don't have to ask anybody but the teachers in Ontario about the incompetent meddling that has gone on and continues to go on with our provincial educational system. Meanwhile, the COVID response, though announced with blaring trumpets, has been reactive and anemic at its very best and harmful at its worst. Those of us in the business world are acutely aware of this. Apparently, this government simply does not believe in community consultation and engagement, whatever that community might be. North Grenville has a terrific strategic plan for its future as a green community, attracting clean industry and retaining its agricultural roots. Nowhere does it state something like, "Oh, by the way, we plan to have a prison here too." This provincial government makes decisions without any kind of reference to those people it purports to serve. There are serious symptoms that there was no research into the trends in correctional services. It appears strongly that since the land was free for the asking, they might just as well make use of it. Claims that research was performed on alternative sites all over the province are clearly fictional, as Mr. Albert alluded to. This government seems to refuse to inform itself to the point where it can actually make an informed decision. By the way, Mr. Ford and his government has opposed the federal carbon tax from its inception. While not everybody supports a carbon tax for any number of reasons, you have to make a considerable mind shift to even consider setting up such a carbon drain as a prison, which is one of the most environmentally disastrous operations to construct and operate in this day and age of global warming. Perhaps the provincial government is taking lessons from the federal Tories, whose delegates voted to reject adding "climate change is real" to their policy book at their recent convention. Our third reason, we have many others, but our third reason for opposing this construction deals with the rural and agricultural nature of the site, as explained by Marie-Thérèse Witsinoas and Alison Toms. My company, RANA, is on record as having worked as part of a consortium with the municipality to acquire the land with a view of establishing an environmental and agricultural research center. Eventually, the site would have been merged into the current KCAT campus, thus correcting the unfortunate error of a previous council of not having acquired the land in the first place. Before I'm accused of sour grapes, I've always believed that the correct approach for determining the use of such land is to open it up for community scrutiny, discussion, and engagement, asking for the ideas of the citizenry and the real stakeholders involved, such as our Indigenous peoples, how best to make use of the considerable assets that this land contains, for example, the Ambar Arena. Many thanks to Lorraine Reckmans for reminding us of Algonquin history in this region. Back when we met with Minister Clark at a time when the land was said to be available, he announced to the gathering, and I quote, "There appears to be some issues associated with the land, and it might take quite some time to clear them up. It appears that we now know what these issues were." I sincerely hope and trust that Minister Clark wasn't hiding information that he already had, but that can't be, since government ministers are always transparent, aren't they? To conclude, the construction of a prison in North Grenville is ill-advised and unnecessary, a drain of taxpayer dollars, and an environmental disaster, none of which will accrue to our community's benefit, nor to that of its citizenry. And please, let's not accept any government minister blabbing off and telling us that it's a done deal. It's our community and not an ill-formed provincial government that must decide what a done deal really is. Thanks for Mayor Drysdale for putting the provincial government on notice. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Cormier. Appreciate it. So now we're going to the last presenter that pre-registered this evening. And that, of course, is the Coalition Against the Proposed Prison Group. And we have Victor Lachance and Colleen Linus for that presentation.
Yes, hi, it's Colleen Linus, and I'm actually going to start us off. So I have slides that I know Halak is going to put up for me.
Perfect.
That's great, thanks. So for those of you who are watching from Toronto, this picture is a section of the heritage farmland you plan to pave over. Next slide, please. Victor and I are part of CAP, and our mandate has been to seek to be a platform for the range of work opposed to the proposed Eastern Ontario Correctional Complex. There are many reasons why it's a bad policy decision. Tonight's speakers have done an excellent job addressing many of the reasons noted on this slide. I also speak as one of two residents invited to a small stakeholder meeting with ministry staff on October 30th of 2020. Unlike the public meeting, this earlier meeting allowed for more engagement and staff were more candid and less guarded. I will refer to content from that meeting during my presentation. Before I move on, I just want to mention one other point, and that is a red herring that I've heard perhaps council, certainly the ministry use. And that is the issue that people opposed to the prison are concerned about community safety. That is in fact not what we've heard tonight. It's not anything CAP has ever endorsed or ever said. And so I really just want to identify that I think that's a red herring that doesn't address the concerns that we've heard tonight. Next slide, please. We've already heard this, but I just want to emphasize that on June 30th, 2020, the Toronto Star published an article about the record number of complaints the Ombudsman had received regarding the province's jails. And in it, it included a statement from a ministry spokesperson committing to building a new jail in Ottawa. Less than 2 months later, the provincial government announced plans to build the Greater Ottawa Correctional Complex in Kemptville. So this is the new jail to be built, quote, in Ottawa. Locally, some people were upset with the name. It was politically expedient, therefore, for the province to change it to the one now being used. But the original name was the accurate one. At the stakeholder meeting, the Associate Deputy Minister, Ali Veshkini, confirmed that all sentenced prisoners from the catchment area of the current OCDC, or the Ottawa Detention Center, would be held in Kemptville, as well as an undefined percentage of the OCDC's remand population. In addition, neither ministry staff nor the politicians in office today can guarantee that the Kemptville facility will not be expanded in the future. Next slide, please. Secure state-of-the-art facility, space for rehabilitation programs, important milestones in the modernization of the correctional system. Sound familiar? These are not recent quotes. These are ministry quotes dating back to the last time the province opened new correctional facilities in Ontario. The Toronto South Detention Centre and the Southwest Detention Centre in Windsor opened in 2014 and have been in the news for all the wrong reasons in the intervening years. Consider the following from 2018. Racism, harassment rampant at Southwest Detention Centre. Also from 2018, how Toronto South Detention Centre became Ontario's most violent jail. And for just last month, human rights complaints detail racism, toxic culture at Toronto South Jail. At the stakeholder meeting, I commented that the ministry should get its house in order before imposing another troubled correctional facility on our town. In response, Mr. Veshkini did not contradict my assertion that they needed to get their house in order, instead stating, when we built those jails in Toronto and Southwest, we weren't in our transformational journey. The absence of a bus service in Kemptville has been discussed. We know it represents a barrier for families without the means to drive to visit loved ones in custody, and for prisoners in returning to their home communities upon release. Ministry staff at the October meeting failed to effectively address the question of family visits, but were adamant that staff would ensure safe passage back to people's homes in Ottawa and beyond once released. I've included the statement at the bottom of this slide because it contradicts their robust defense of their discharge planning processes. It was provided to CBC's The Current in response to a story about an Indigenous woman found frozen to death 3 days after being released from a Saskatchewan provincial jail. Note the limitations in their language now. Ministry staff will, when operationally feasible, make reasonable efforts to support inmates to travel to their home community. On these matters and more, the people of Kemptville and North Granville are being asked to suspend disbelief and accept that they will get it right this time. Shiny new buildings do not fix broken systems and toxic cultures. Next slide, please. From an article in Ontario Agri-News, we know that as early as November 2019, Ministers Steve Clark and Ernie Hardeman knew of Council's aspirations to purchase the land now earmarked for the prison and restore it to its status as part of Kemptville's agricultural and farming heritage. If you doubt that Minister Clark had the capacity to push back, consider his own words from 2019. I'd be happy to facilitate another ministry putting a job and economic generator on that land, but I'm not going to let another ministry get it and just sit on it. Others tonight have already spoken to the false narrative of economic benefits. That statement is relevant, however, because Minister Clark asserted in it that he had the capacity to influence the decision. As a cabinet minister and local MPP for this riding, it defies logic to think that he did not know which ministry was holding the land and the plan to build a jail. We will likely never know, but it is reasonable to assume that Minister Clark was fully aware of the plans when he made those comments. At some point, he did know, and yet he failed to advise the mayor and others of what was in the works, failed to ask the simple question, what do you think of this idea? There is absolutely no evidence that he tried to push back, ask the tough questions, or advocate on the part of this community. Yes, the province owns that land and has the sole discretion to determine where correctional facilities are built. But this top-down, poorly considered decision showed its lack of respect for municipal council and residents, and on the part of Minister Clark, a failure to represent his constituents. There is an off-ramp for this government. It would be nice to think that tonight's well-researched and compelling presentations could help with that off-ramp. We know the plan was in the works prior to the onset of the pandemic. It would be prudent for the government to recognize that current fiscal pressures provide an opportunity to rethink priorities and cancel this planned build. The government should take the steps needed to make real changes in our correctional and judicial systems instead of wasting scarce public funds to expand its capacity to incarcerate. I say to Premier Ford, get your house in order. Thank you very much, and over to Victor.
And that's 10 minutes.
So I still see the, yes, okay, thank you. And can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
Victor, just like the other groups for which there was multiple presenters, you have an additional 10 minutes, but we will stop at 20 minutes.
Yes, thank you for that.
Perfect, thank you.
I hope to be shorter than that.
Okay,
so thank you to council, yes, for organizing this meeting. I'd like to recognize the Anishinaabe on whose land we're meeting. I'd also like to thank municipal staff, including you, Heather, for all the help in preparing for this meeting. In this part of CAP's presentation, I intend to focus primarily on the actions and inactions of municipal council. And I should note that CAP has also made a written submission concerning the proposed prison, comparing provincial claims versus the evidence and the known facts. I have to say, Your Worship, I was a little dismayed at your introductory comments, because I find it disheartening, maybe a little embarrassing actually, to watch our progressive municipal councils seem to simply wave the white flag and surrender to the heavy-handedness of the provincial government. In this respect, you're not representing the interests of the residents of North Grenville and Kemptville. You're representing the interests of the Ford government, and I find that regrettable. Now, even though council has been in regular, if not constant, contact with the minister and office of the Solicitor General, it still remains that both council and the province have not been saying anything of substance to the residents of Kemptville, and in fact, have let some inaccurate public statements remain on the public record, even though they know that they're incorrect, thereby, I think, misleading residents as they weigh the various aspects of the proposed prison. So I think it is time for the municipality to tell us what the province has been telling them that is that they haven't already told us, and for the municipality to tell us whether they're for or against the prison and why. Now, also, although council has been in regular discussions with the province, and we must assume our MPP, Steve Clark, not once in the past 7 months has council broached the subject of the prison in any public part of a council meeting. And for a major issue like a proposed prison, that is very odd and a problem. But there's an even bigger problem if municipal council is being less than transparent, if they are making any secret backroom deals with the provincial government, especially since this is the provincial government that shortly after the announcement, once the conversation began, the Solicitor General's office and Minister Clark dangled the possibility of things like a soccer field or a greenhouse or a gymnasium on the land next to the prison. And why did they do so? Because they know that prisons are not popular for all sorts of reasons. And you heard many of them tonight. We believe it's the same reason the province kept the announcement secret from Kemptville residents and our local government, because I'm sure they suspected that they might hear about very worthwhile competing uses and viable options for this precious farmland. Again, ones that we have heard tonight from Marie-Thérèse and Paul Cormier, for example. Now, this is not how an ostensibly open and transparent government should operate. Council should not be swayed or taken in by these suggested inducements. Council should not be making deals, especially behind closed doors, not transparent deals, based on little sweeteners that make them more favorable to the government's proposal. Instead, we believe that for any significant project or development of this magnitude, I'm sure municipal council, consistent with good planning, should have and would have by now carried out a thorough evaluation of the economic or other impacts on the community, including and especially local taxpayer-funded initiatives already in progress, things like the campus master plan, the downtown revitalization, the tourism strategy, the vision of a green and growing community. I think council has a, sorry, 5 more, is that what you're saying?
Sorry, apologies. Sorry, we're at 15 minutes right now.
Yes, okay, thank you. Where was I? I think the council has a responsibility to determine and communicate how the proposed prison is in keeping with the master plan, the revitalization of the downtown, the tourism strategy, the marketing of green and growing. Council needs to equally determine and communicate how being known as a prison town will affect the challenging part of attracting businesses and tourists and families and seniors from Ottawa and other urban areas to Kemptville. How will council plan to mitigate the impact of a large prison on the goals and aspirations of the community as previously set out by the community? It's clear to CAP that you cannot successfully do that. And I do not believe the Kemptville residents want to see their heritage and agricultural history simply become an incarceration suburb of Ottawa instead of a thriving, unique community with healthy and green and high-tech economic opportunities. So it's for these reasons set out in our presentation that CAP is adamant that nothing should happen on the proposed site until the Ministry of the Solicitor General and Mr. Clark's office have answered all the questions that they themselves solicited and requested prior to the November consultation, and that they have yet to answer, along with the additional information they said that they would provide during both the stakeholder session of late October and the public engagement session of late November, information that they have yet to provide. CAP believes that the best way that this council can fulfill its responsibility in the interest of taxpayers at this stage is to demand that the Office of the Solicitor General, and Minister Clark answer the submitted questions, the emails, the letters to the satisfaction of North Grenville residents before any further, or any activity for that matter, occurs on the proposed site. Furthermore, nothing should happen on the site until the provincial government has consulted and come to an agreement with the Anishinaabe, part of the Algonquin people who own the land on which they propose to put on the site. So at the very least, the provincial government should press the pause button and allow residents and indeed municipal council the necessary time to carefully examine this proposal from all angles, all of the angles you've heard tonight, in an open, transparent, and evidence-based fashion, whether you're for or against the prison. I believe our municipal council can lead the way in pressing the Office of the Solicitor General, Minister Clark, to get them to press the pause button. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lachance and Ms. Linus. Certainly that completes the presentation portion for those who had pre-registered. I'm just going to do a quick canvassing. It is 9:13. I would like a signal from other I should say other attendees of the session this evening. If there are any individuals who had planned to make brief comments. Again, we don't have a lot of time, but I just want to, if anyone who's attending the session wants to indicate their appetite to speak, can you please raise your hands? Raise your hand on the screen. Again, we had committed to a very short additional portion of the meeting. So I'm just looking for any raised hands through the Zoom function. I think we all know where the raise hand button is, or I would hope so at this stage of the game. So I'm just having the clerk scan the screen.
I don't know where the button is.
Okay, and is that Trish speaking? Okay.
It's Nadia Gray speaking.
Okay, thank you, Nadia. So I see Nadia, so I'm acknowledging Nadia and I see David.
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, is there anyone else?
There is not.
Melina would like to speak as well. I don't know where the raise hand is either, sorry.
That's okay, Melina, you have raised your hand. Okay, so then just looking to council colleagues and doing a last call here, please use the raise hand function or just speak up. We've got 3 speakers who want to add to the formal presentations this evening. I'm not seeing anyone else, clerk, so I'd like you to confirm that we just have 3. If that's the case, I think colleagues, and I'm looking to council, I think it might be prudent to hear these 3 individuals now and then carry on with the adjournment of the meeting. And I would suggest that we give each of the individuals 5 minutes maximum to add to whatever's been said this evening. So again, we're not seeing anyone else.
I have an additional member of the public, Your Worship, named Jared, who's raised his hand.
Okay. So I have David, Nadia, Melina, and Jared. And I'm going to close it with those 4 individuals, unless there's someone who's been raising their hands who hasn't been able to be recognized by the clerk's office. Okay. So with that in mind, I think Deputy Mayor, did you want to say something before we go into that section of our meeting?
No, Madam Mayor, I was just, I'm interested in hearing from them, and let's keep going. Yep.
Okay. So then we're going to take, well, I will be cutting you off at 5 minutes. So I'm sorry, but of course you do have an opportunity to follow up any verbal remarks, you know, with a fulsome email into the input@northgrenville.on.ca. And just out of respect for colleagues, staff, and others on the call this evening, I'll have the clerk signal at the 4-minute mark that you have 1 minute to wrap up. Does that work, Ms. Babcock-Cormier? Okay, great.
Yes, it does, Your Worship.
Okay, so I'll just go in the order in which these were brought to my attention. I see a David. David, if you could just let us know, do you live in the municipality and what brings you to the meeting? Thank you.
Yeah, I live in the municipality. I live in Bishop's Mills. I've been living here for a while. So thank you for putting this on and giving some time. I've been observing this evening, and a couple of things have struck me that I wanted to share, especially what Justin Pichet said and Aaron Doyle, which is we have a fight on our hands. And when there's a fight, there are lines drawn. And I think it's quite appropriate for Victor Lachance to ask council which side of that line they're on, because the residents are opposed to this. The majority of residents are opposed, and we will fight against it. But we need your help because you have political influence. You're at the table. You're having the conversations. And it's important that you support the residents because this decision affects the community as a whole. And I think if, as a community, we are to oppose this and we are to fight this, we must do it in a consolidated fashion together. I know there's a lot of groups with special interests, and I would encourage them all to come together and unite to put a great offense against this. Because we have outsiders from the community trying to dictate what happens in the community. And we all know that the building a jail in this community is going to have a negative effect. So we have to fight, we have to oppose, we have to put lawn signs on, we have to come in the streets with banners and let the provincial government know that we don't want this in our backyard. And I know that's a term that we use a lot of times, not in my backyard, but respectfully, this is my backyard. This is where I live. And I'm concerned about where I live. I'm concerned about what goes on in my community. And when there's something I'm opposed to, I will let that voice be known. And I look at everybody here who's here concerned. And I'd like to let you know that together we can make a difference. You know, individual groups have their own individual points, but we must go together to make any kind of impact against this. That's all I've got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. We'll go on to Nadia. Hi, Nadia.
Hi. So, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. I very much appreciate it. I would like to mirror and support the last speaker who said we should all work together. My concern is that our MPP, Mr. Steve Clark, has not come to this meeting. And I believe that that is important because the issues that have been raised tonight are at the very heart of how we live here and what happens. And if it is not listened to, being present in the community where we can watch his reaction, get a reaction, we end up thinking that it is council. But council, you are powerless because you're not the decision makers. You haven't really come out and said what you support. You haven't done a very visible, proactive on behalf of the community. And for that reason, I believe that we need a hearing with the people that make the decisions. And they are not willing. They don't respond to emails. The best I've been able to do is to get a response from the executive assistant, very nice person. But this is too important to not be listened to not have a fight. And as the previous speaker said, it's time for the community to march, to do signs, to have their voices heard and seen. And one of the things that I would like to know is, since this is being put on video, will it be on, or can it be on TV Ontario when they do the visits to the various main streets in Ontario? They do specials on towns. And I would suggest that we need such a special to raise our profile. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you for arranging this meeting. Goodbye.
Thanks, Nadia. Appreciate it. Next, we'll go to Melina. Hi, Melina.
Hi. So I'm a parent of children who attend Rivière-d'Eau on the Kemptville College campus and also a small business owner here in North Grenville. Been here for 15 years. And I didn't watch every presentation. Unfortunately, I had to go and put my children to sleep, so I may have missed something, but I feel like we haven't heard from stakeholders on the campus specifically. And so I just want to speak to that a little bit. I know that with the prison going across the road, there are rules around how close cannabis stores and liquor stores and whatnot can be to schools. And I feel like this prison encroaches on the school, the campus, many other businesses that are right there trying to grow something very positive for our community. And so I'm not quite sure why there wouldn't be provincial or municipal guidelines around what can go around a school if it's a prison, whereas there are guidelines for everything else. So I'd kind of like that question answered, because it hasn't come up that I have heard tonight. And I also want to speak to what David said about getting out and fighting and putting up signs and whatnot. And I agree that the majority of the municipality probably does not want a prison here right now. I would also say that we've been kind of quiet about it. And I think the timing of this has been really rough. I feel like it was almost intentional to give us this news in the middle of the pandemic when, quite frankly, Right now, we're all in survival mode. Survival as parents, survival as business owners. We're just making it through this. I personally have very little energy for this, hence me not putting together a full presentation and just doing a little blurb here at the end. It's just the reality of the situation of where we're at right now. So please, to our municipal councillors, please don't take this silence as consent. This is not consent. This is simply survival. That's all I needed to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Melina, for your comments. Appreciated. And then the last person we'll recognize this evening is Jared.
If
Don't
Jared
have
could
a last
state
name.
his last name for the record, Your Worship.
And whether or not you're a resident here in North Grenville, Jared, thanks.
Hello, Madam Mayor. Hello, Council. So it's Dana Furcashu, in fact.
Oh, hi, Dana.
Hi, how are you? So first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for arranging this meeting and allowing lots of people to express their opinions. As a Kemptville, person, I really appreciate the fact that the council it's listening to the community, and I'm very grateful. I just have only one question, because I assume that the council is in constant contact with the Minister Clark, and do you have a feel of what is, how did he receive the opposition from the groups that they were formed here in Kemptville against the building of the prison? Was he surprised? Are they still, taking in consideration all the things that we are bringing forward? So do you have anything that you can share with us?
I'm very loath to speak on behalf of MPP Steve Clark's office or the ministry. They're both listening this evening. And certainly they've said that they'll take into account all the comments, and, as conversations and dialogue evolves over the next few months, we expect them to address all of the comments this evening. So I really think I can't say more on their behalf because it's not really my role or place. But when we advised them of the meeting this evening, they were very keen to ensure their not participation, but they've been here the entire time to observe. So, and we appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. So then I'm just looking to the clerk. I think then we'll move on. We haven't missed anyone. We are moving on. Is that right, Ms. Babcock-Cormier?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay. So again, the purpose of tonight's meeting was really to hear from all of you, and we want to extend our appreciation not to the 13 folks, or certainly I should say 9 presenters, 4 additional individuals or presentations, 9 presentations, because I know there were multiple presenters for some of those presentations, as well as, of course, the 4 individuals. We also appreciate, I think, the 60 to 80 people who got online and have been certainly streaming the event through Zoom or through YouTube. So it is appreciated. We're extremely grateful to all of you who have taken the time to either listen or speak. And we're going to leave it there at this stage. So colleagues, we have no other business for this meeting except a confirmation bylaw, Heather, which I don't think is necessary. Do we need a confirmation bylaw this evening?
You do, Your Worship. There's a resolution just to receive the presentations, numbers 1 through 9.
Excellent. And are we also recognizing the 4 individuals who spoke after the fact?
They will be speaking. We'll note them in the agenda.
Okay, excellent. So to that end, Councillor Strachian and Councillor Barkley, would you please move and second that Council receives the following presentations? And I don't need to list them there. They're the 9 that we heard from, as well as we note the 4 individuals who commented subsequent to the presentations. Councillor Strachian and Councillor Barkley, you're good to move in second. Thank you. Council colleagues, all in favor? Good, thank you. And I think we're just
Still silent.
I'm okay. And I'm now going to motion to adjourn. I don't, is there someone we didn't recognize? I'm just looking at the clerk.
Those were the individuals who, when asked, raised their hands.
Okay.
And we've gone
Okay.
through that list. And
Okay.
we have a confirmation bylaw, 3521.
Okay, so then we'll move, and I'll ask Councillor Barkley and Councillor McManaman that bylaw 3521 to confirm the proceedings of council at its special meeting held on March 23rd, 2021 be adopted and passed. Council colleagues, just raise your hands. Good. And then finally, we'll have a motion to adjourn. And that's, I'll ask again, Councillor O'Sullivan and Councillor Barkley to please move in second that the special meeting of council adjourn at 9:29 p.m. Colleagues, just raise your hands if you're in favor. Thank you. Again, our many, many thanks and appreciation for all the thoughtful considerations, interventions, correspondence and communication. And council looks forward to following up, not just with the community, but obviously with the Ministry of the Solicitor General and MPP Steve Clark as we move forward. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thanks.
Night.